why do I need an outside admissions counselor if I have a counselor at school? Hello, and welcome to the Admittedly podcast. My name is Thomas Caleel. I'm the former director of MBA admissions and financial aid for my alma mater, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. In this podcast, I don't promise easy answers or quick fixes, but I will use my decades of experience to help you achieve your education goals. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Admittedly podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Caleel, and we are getting well into season 4 here. Today, we're going to talk about something that's very important. It's something that I've been hearing a lot about in the DMs, and it's why do I need an outside admissions counselor if I have a counselor at school? And this is a really, really good question. I hear this all the time. I hear it a lot too from private school parents. And they're like, hey, we're paying all this money for private school. We have a counselor. Why would we need outside help? And I want to be very clear. This is not a sales pitch, right? I know families that work just on their own with the school counselor do very well. And we have obviously plenty of families that work with Admittedly and do very well also. So I think this is really a deeply personal decision for your family, but I want to lay out some facts and ideas and thoughts so that you can go into this informed. Now, before we start, I want to say up front that admissions counselors at schools are fantastic. They are wonderful human beings. They work very, very hard under fairly trying conditions. And so I have nothing but love and respect for you and the job that you do. And I don't want to set this up in any way as an adversarial conversation, right? Anything you do with an outside independent admissions counselor and your school counselor has to be done in harmony. You have to respect the authority and position and experience of the school counselor. That is paramount. Don't be those parents. Don't be the student that says, well, but I work with Thomas and Thomas says this, because you're putting yourself in a tough position with that admissions counselor. They write your student overview. They write a recommendation. They have to frame you in the context of the school. And so if you are adversarial with them, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous position. So please don't do that. So let's talk first of all about admissions counselors. Now, I speak with students who go to public schools where the admissions counselors might have 100, 200, 300 students, right? You might, if you're lucky, get a cursory 5-minute meeting. You might only work with them over email. So for those of you who are in that position, I think having an outside counselor is critical. They're going to help you navigate. They're going to help you pay attention to deadlines. They're going to help you form your story and your strategy, where your school admissions counselor they're just not set up for that. That's not their role. That's not what they're supposed to do. They're more traffic cops. They're kind of managing flow to the different colleges, universities, etc. But let's talk about, let's say, a smaller public school or more likely a private school. Now, private schools generally will have either dedicated full-time staff as college counselors, or they will have faculty who have a dual role who will also be college counselors. This comes into play a lot also with boarding schools and private schools, but I want you to keep a few things in mind. First of all, I don't want to impugn the credibility of any of these counselors, because I've worked with some private school counselors, some of them at the top boarding schools, and they do excellent work. They're deeply knowledgeable. They're incredibly well educated, and they really care about the students. But here's the thing. These college counselors usually, even in the best schools, have a student load of around 30 to 35 students, and that is a lot. The other thing is, you want to think about who do they owe their loyalty to, all right? It is not you, and that's not a bad thing. Think about it this way, right? The corporate attorney works for the corporation, not for you. And so what the college counselor's job is yes, to help you in the best way possible and help you with the forms, help you interface with the teachers, get the teacher recommendations. Their job is to write the counselor report. And so if you go to a smaller private school or boarding school, there's a lot of paperwork involved, right? A lot of intake forms, a lot of questions, surveys, and they try to be very, very thorough. But at the end of the day, their responsibility lies to the school. right? Because the school endures, you graduate. And that's very, very important. So as they're looking at relationships with colleges, this is very important. They want to have maintain a strong relationship with the colleges. So they're interacting with the regional reps. They're building that reputation. They're building that history with the school. And that's very, very important. But if you come in and say, for example, I want this particular school and they don't see it, they're not going to advocate that strongly for you because they have other families in the stack. They have other families from the school that maybe are in a stronger position, other students who might be recruited or have better academics or have strong legacy at that university. And so a lot of times families come to me and they say, we just had our first meeting with the college counselor and they're completely sandbagging us. We wanted to aim at these schools and they're pushing us down to like tier 2 schools. And we're really kind of upset about that. And so when you look at it from the point of view of the college counselor, I get it, right? They don't want to overinflate expectations. They want to make sure that students get into at least one school that is decent. And they're not really in the business of pushing hard for every student to achieve their reach or dream school, right? Because they just can't. They have too many students. They're juggling too many things. The other thing is that the college counselors oftentimes are not able or they don't have the time to help you articulate an effective strategy. And what they'll do many times is they'll say, hey, we organized an essay workshop for 2-3 days with the juniors with our wonderful English department, and they're going to help you write your essays. Now, I hope that you'll go back. I believe it's pinned on my social media at AdmittedlyCo. I did a reel on the difference between an English essay and an admissions essay. So English teachers, very well-meaning, love you, still remember my English teachers' names, but English teachers have a very different way of writing. Now, some of them, yes, have learned how to write good admissions essays over the years, so I don't want to say that all English teachers are like this, but most English teachers want to develop this story and this thesis, and it's a much more kind of literary, beautiful way of writing. And you come out with a very nice essay. It's a very nice story, but is it effective? And the answer most times is no. Why? Because good admissions essay writing is offensive to English teachers, right? You are cramming ideas in, you are abbreviating things, you are getting directly to the point. Your hook is very different than a thesis statement. And so intuitively, a lot of English teachers are like, that's not great writing. Remember, this is not an essay contest. Yes, your grammar needs to be correct, spelling, punctuation, all those things. But I want you to write in a way that conveys what you want admissions to know about you. That is the critical thing here. So you are communicating information. If you think about a legal brief, if you think about an executive summary in business, it's the same thing. You are synthesizing and summarizing ideas in a way that is easily and quickly digestible to the reader. So the other thing I would say is that your school college counselor is not going to be able to go in and get deep and strategic on things like activities, right? They're not going to help you think about, okay, how do I get strategic with my recommenders? How do I integrate that? Am I talking about an additional information essay? How am I talking about challenges that I've overcome? How am I talking about my involvement? How am I framing this? How am I orienting this to each school? Because if you think about, if they have 30, let's say on the low side, they have 30 students, and each of those students are applying to at least 15 universities, they're not going to go in and review all your essays. I mean, it's just a staggering amount of work that no one human being can endure. And so what happens a lot of times is that you can fall through the cracks. And does that mean that you're not going to a good college? No, but it means that maybe your top 2 or 3 schools are just elusive and slip out of your grasp. And then you end up at a perfectly good school, but it's not that stretch school that you had envisioned. So I think that having an outside voice can be very helpful. Now, you do have to be very careful. And I want to be very, very clear about this. Some schools will say very, very directly, under no circumstances should you bring in outside counselors. And there's a reason for that, right? It's because in the past, outside counselors, parents have been very combative, maybe with the college counseling team, and that's never okay. It's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to voice your opinion, but You can't come in and just run roughshod over the top of your school college counselor. We've talked about this earlier in the podcast. That sets you up negatively when they're sitting down to write the recommendation and they're thinking about, how mistreated they were. That's not good for you. But also, you can't have a student that's having to follow two sets of advice. So what I always do is I look and I ask parents, I say, okay, how amenable is the school to working with me? And schools are different. I have schools where I've spoken directly with with the student's college counselor, and they love to work. We work together. I make it clear that I respect their experience and what they're trying to do with the school and the student. We work together and we get really good outcomes. If the school is just openly hostile to outside counselors, you have to be careful. So in that case, we will always go in and be respectful and listen. And this is very important. You have to listen to what the college counselor is telling you, because sometimes they're telling you you don't have a chance at that school because of the other students that are applying, because they're ahead of you in that stack and there's nothing you can do to get around that, and that the school is not going to advocate for you at that particular school. So you need to learn to read between the lines. So I always ask my parents, tell me exactly what was said. Take very careful notes and tell me exactly what was said in the meeting so that I can parse and read between the lines of what they are telling us. But what we can also do is kind of arm the parents, arm the students to go into those meetings with the counselors and say, hey, listen, I was thinking about this. I thought maybe that this would be a good approach. What if we did things this way? And then when it's coming from the parents and the students, not in an aggressive confrontational way, oftentimes those ideas can get integrated into the strategy, and the college counselors are much more amenable to taking them. So I think the bottom line here is that you need to think about your student and what you're trying to accomplish. If your student is working really hard, they have good grades, you want them to really stretch and reach, especially if you're not a big legacy at these colleges, especially if you're not a recruited athlete. I think that having somebody who can really kind of come in and help you with the strategy, help you with the essays, help you with the activity list, help you structuring the application can be critical and make a really big difference. Likewise, if your student has struggled a little bit, right? A lot of times those students get kind of shunted off to the side by the college advisors because they're like, hey, this is such a heavy lift that we're just not going to do it. We can't do it. And so the focus then becomes, okay, they're focusing on the easier wins, and you need somebody that's advocating. I had a student this year at one of the top prep schools in the country, had gotten in trouble for violating the substance policy, but had really learned their lesson and really worked to turn that around. And so we worked really, really hard to educate them on what they needed to do with their application, what they needed to talk about with the counselor, how to enlist school resources. And they got some phenomenal, really, really stretch results that nobody was expecting. Their counselor was, in fact, pretty surprised with what they were able to do. And that was, a situation where we were told, no outside counselors. So we had to work kind of in a clandestine fashion with the student, but ended up being very, very effective and essentially up-leveled them at least one tier in the schools that they were targeting. So it can make a big difference. Again, I think most college counselors at schools really do mean well. They're trying hard. They're doing, yeoman's work under difficult circumstances, but they're doing it with large student loads. Their priority is the school, and you need to take control of your destiny, your child's destiny. And so if you can afford it, find a counselor that works, that fits for you, even if you're just getting, for example, essay review, but ideally something where you have an integrated strategy there. It can can be the difference between a tier 1 and a tier 2 school. There are, of course, a lot of free resources out there. Listen to my podcast, follow me on social media at AdmittedlyCo. I'm not saying you have to run out and spend money on a counselor, but definitely get help. Don't just rely on your school's counselor because you want the best result for you and your family. Thank you for listening. We've got a lot of content coming up on the podcast. Remember to follow us on socials at AdmittedlyCo. Would love for you to comment on our socials. Tell me about your experience with school counselors. Tell me what's worked, what's not worked. It's a great learning experience for families that are coming behind you and trying to figure this out. So tips, ideas, thoughts, please share them with us. I'm really looking forward to engaging with you on that. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Please take a moment to subscribe to the Admittedly podcast and download this episode. I welcome you to share your thoughts and questions with me. You can find us on social media at Admittedly Podcast. I look forward to continuing our journey together.